Hey guys, welcome back for another Sunday where we're doing annotation. First of all, happy Mother's Day to all of the mamas out there. This goes out to the cis women, the trans women, the step mamas, the adoptive mamas, the, biologically kept. Just saying happy Mother's Day. I hope you all have a fantastic day. Anyway, we are going to talk about chapter 5. All right, so I have a lot to say about chapter 5. And I don't know where chapter 6 starts. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, so I have a lot to say about chapter 5. I read this weeks ago, had my notes, and hadn't sat down to film. So on this cold May day, because it snowed the other day, I know, crazy, right? Like we're almost in mid-May, and all of a sudden it was cold and snowy. I don't like this. I mean, I know that's what happens around my area, but it doesn't mean I like it. Just saying. Anyway, so we, at this point, Harry is in, oh my God, I am losing my brain. Not quite London, but it's not Hogs. Oh my gosh, why can't I? Anyway, Diagon Alley. That's where he's at. I couldn't think. My brain is not working today. And he is about to leave for. They're all about to go into London to get the train to get to Hogwarts. Okay. So, number one, Harry has a protective detail to be able to get on the train. They have brand new cars. They made sure that nobody's following. There are very certain people that are undercover so that there is safety, because they really, really believe that Snape is after Harry. But Snape is not after Harry. As I've mentioned in previous chapters, he is after Peter Pettigrew, aka Scabbers, right? Now, Scabbers happens to be with Harry because that's Ron's pet, but they don't know that yet. So, just saying. So, to say a few things, first of all, Molly Weasley made sandwiches for all of the kids, including Harry, including Hermione. Like, she is just a loving, doting, very protective mama. As many kids as she has, she still cares about children. She cares that, they're getting a good education, that they're well behaved, that, and this includes Ron's friends, right? And I think that's really, really important, because especially towards Harry, like, Harry's guardians, right, the Dursleys, were never doting, were never loving, were never protective. Like, it was always very abusive. And so to have, like, the quite opposite, even though Molly can be strict, is very nice. But also, Hermione's family, even though they're muggles, just dropped her off. And so Hermione is also under the care of the Weasleys at this point. I don't know if I would have ever done that, whether my kid is, first of all, I don't think I would send my kid to boarding school, to be fair, but I do homeschool. But to just, like, randomly drop off your kid to a family you've never met, and, like, this is their third year, it kind of feels weird to me. Like, you've never formally introduced yourself to the Weasleys. I'm just saying, like, I know this is supposed to be set in the 90s, but as a 90s kid, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck? And I'm saying this as nicely as possible because I grew up in New York City. I grew up, going from downtown Manhattan to the Upper West Side for school. So keep that in mind. I was traveling alone a lot of the time. And even then, I questioned my parents, like, what the fuck were you thinking? Okay, now, yes, it was part of our, our thing. A lot of us had like groups of friends. So I actually went to, for that school, because that was my middle school, I went with my cousin. So it was usually her and my aunt. So it's not like I was totally alone. At least for the mornings, we would go together. Coming home was a little bit of a different story. If I was coming home, um, yes, it would usually be on my own. Um, at that point, I had a cell phone, right? Cell phones existed. It was the Nokia phone. I was joking with my mom the other day about that. I was like, man, do you remember like my first phone? I was sixth grade. Like I was younger than my kid now, and I didn't even have texting. It was straight phone calls or playing Snake. Like that's it. That was my first phone. But I guess you do have to know your kid. Like I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have sent me to that school, especially by myself. Like they would have figured out something to make sure I was okay if they didn't feel like I was responsible, or I would have gone to a school that was closer to home. um but again, that's if I was traveling alone. If I wasn't traveling alone, well, so like I said, the mornings I went with my cousin and my aunt because she worked there, and my cousin went to school there. That's partly how I got in. I got a scholarship. Anyway, long story short. And then other days, Fridays being the exception, that was the day that I went home on my own because we got out at 12. I was in a private school, so keep that in mind. It was only middle school. I would say after school, I was a theater kid. Funny, I was talking to my kid about this. I was like, I was a theater kid. Like I was doing the plays, and I was, when I was in elementary, I was doing Tada, which is an after school program. I did our school plays. I did, so there's a camp up by me, not too far away, I should say. It's called West Corright. And for the older kids, they do Shakespeare. And so I did that growing up as well, in the summers. Okay, so like keep in mind, I was big into theater. Still am. Still very much am. But my point being is, even though that's kind of the way that I grew up, because I was, a 90s kid, I don't parent that way. Right. And I'm not saying like my kid couldn't possibly be able to like if we were still in New York City, like at his age, he's 13 now. If he wanted to go to like Chipotle, that's like 5 minutes away by himself, as long as he had a phone, I don't know how I would feel about it. So, then you have Arthur Weasley. He's being a very protective dad figure, making sure Harry is safe. Like I said, they were working together, and he did let Harry know, like, don't go looking for trouble. Hold on, my dog wants out. It is chilly today. Hi, Bear. Hi, my big old boy. All right, sorry. I am just not editing this because I'm not using my computer at the moment. Okay. So, Harry, Hermione, and Ron get on the train. And the only compartment that they could find that didn't have kids in it was Professor Lupin. Now, I want to make this clear. They do mention in this book, Lupin is the only professor who has ever used the train as a professor, right? Not as a student, but as a professor to get to Hogwarts. Like, why did we never think about that before? I don't know. Like, I was just thinking about, I'm like, how do the other, like, what? First of all, as someone who used to teach, right? And like knowing prep, my mom taught in schools and stuff like that. You go in to prep your classroom, right? Now we're talking about a boarding school, so of course you have to live there, but like you're not prepping your classroom. You don't really have much done. You're kind of winging it. There's just a lot that I'm like questioning, just saying. But the second thing is they were talking about, this was the first time they mentioned honeydukes, right, in Hogsmeade. They also mentioned the Shack, which is known to be haunted. Now, I will say, they talked about how the Whomping Willow was planted the first year that Lupin showed up as a student. Now, this is very important to the history of the book, okay? So, as we'll learn later in the book, that there is a passage that goes from the Whomping Willow to the Shrieking Shack in Hogsmeade. It wasn't actually haunted. It's that it was Lupin changing into his werewolf self, which we do find. Lupin does mean werewolf. And so Dumbledore had planted the Weeping Willow to cover the entrance so that no other student got in Lupin's way. The only 3 other students that used that entrance, right, were Lupin's friends, Peter Pettigrew, Sirius Black, and James Potter. All 3 became, were able to transform, right? I can't remember what James was able to transform into, but we have Sirius Black as the Black Dog. We have Peter Pettigrew as Scabbers the Rat. So, like, understand, these guys know what they're what they're doing, or supposed to know what they're doing. Then we also first meet a Dementor, right? These are the Azkaban prison guards, and they literally suck the life out of people. And this is what they're talking about when it comes to the actual prison. They're like, yeah, most people don't survive that because they lose, not necessarily because the Dementors take their life, but it's so freaking depressing that the Dementors don't even, I shouldn't say they don't care, but like, they're not seeking out the joy, right? Also, when his life was being sucked out of him by the Dementor that he was saved by Lupin, Harry first started hearing his mother's screams. He didn't recognize it, but he's like, I heard women's screams. Did anyone hear that? And so it's triggering the memory from when he was 1, when he watched his mother die. And I want you guys to remember that. He's hearing these screams on the train, right? This isn't the first time that he's come into contact with death. But that brings me to when they arrive in Hogsmeade and they're getting into the carriages, why he's not seeing the Thistles when he knows and has witnessed death a few times at this point, right? Why he's not seeing the Thistles, but yet he sees it later in the series. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm just saying it's a plot hole. Something that, like, when you're writing, you have to be like, look, there's going to be plot holes sometimes when you're writing fantasy or romance or things like that. Try to avoid it as much as possible. It was also mentioned a few different times by a few different people, not only Lupin, but also Madame Pomfrey, that chocolate is a cure to the Dementor effects. So the chocolate, like, brings joy, and I think that's maybe what it is. Also, when they first get off the train and McGonagall is checking on Hermione and Harry, right, Harry and Hermione, I should say, this is when Hermione is given the time turner, right? So we've heard that she's going to be taking all these extra classes. I don't think as kids when we're first reading this, we're paying that much attention to all these, like I said, the plot holes. How is this going to work? There were clues before. We didn't, like, a lot of us didn't recognize it. Okay. They have their dinner. We have, of course, Snape being Snape, loathing everyone who takes the job of Defense Against the Dark Arts. But it feels like Snape has it especially out for Lupin. And my guess is, knowing the rest of the book, is that it's because Lupin, James Potter, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew kind of made fun of him. And also, we know that Snape was in love with Lily, Harry's mother. And so he just resents everyone. We also have Hagrid taking on a teaching job as care of magical creatures. I don't know if I would have ever given as much as I love Hagrid, right? Thinking realistically, right? Thinking if I was the headmaster, as much as you love Hagrid, right? Would he have been the best fit as a teacher to these children, especially knowing that he's had a dragon, right? He's had Aragog, the spider, right? That he's had the three-headed dog, right? Which was in the first book. He's known to go after very dangerous creatures, and not in, how do I explain? Like, he's a very loving man who just loves animals, but he doesn't necessarily understand the risks that come with it. So he is potentially putting these children in danger. Also, as much as I wouldn't want oversight from a headmaster, right? You have a book of monsters that have literally attacked people. A book, and look, I love books. I'm not for banning books. But if this was my magical world, hell the fuck no. Okay, like, so many adults are failing these children and putting them in more danger. And that's without the magic aspect, like just based off their personas. What? But we will meet the hippogriff soon. Buckbeak. Why couldn't I think? We'll meet Buckbeak shortly. So that'll be in the next chapter. I do like Buckbeak. That being said, the reason that you guys know that I'm annotating this. I'm keeping a very close eye. I don't like J.K. Rowling, but it's important to talk about her work and like how bigotry bleeds in, right? This idea of, we have Harry being in a kinship adoption. It's not really adoption, but in a kinship guardianship that is just ultimately not safe in so many aspects. We have so many adults just failing these kids. You don't have critical thinking skills. And like, as a kid myself, growing up with these books, you don't necessarily always recognize that, especially as I'm a parent now, and especially as a adoptee, I do some adoption content. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, the societal norm against adoptees and how like we should be grateful, and oh my gosh, like who the fuck cares about, the placement that we're in, and yet we legit have people putting us in danger. Like, I was just reading another book, and she's a step parent. I'll talk about it I'll do a whole, book review, but step parent adoptee to foster care, how much danger she's in. And I was like the book has some good parts to it, because it talks about some really important things, but also it's an Indigenous representation book by an Indigenous author. So I give her credit where credit's due. But there were some things I'm like, y'all just really hate us. Y'all really think that like adoption is like rose-colored glasses, or if we can't be with our family, you know, there's options. And like, oh God, I was arguing with someone and they're like, well, it should be normalized. And I'm like they were confusing safe external care with adoption. And I'm like, that's completely different things. And like I said, like, yes, the first thing you would think would be to be in a kinship, you know, placement, but that's not always the best option, right? There's nuances, and when you're writing your characters, right? When you're doing your work, when you are, I'm going to say this from an author point of view, right? Especially when you're talking about representing a minority community, which adoptees are. You really do have to do your research, and you should. I know we're talking 2026 versus, you know, the 1990s when this was released. You really should have sensitivity readers. You really should be running this by, are these things okay? Even in fantasy books, okay? Even in. Because yeah, I'm going to pick it apart. You guys might not like that. You may not be here for it, but I'm going to pick it apart. That's what I'm doing. I'm picking it apart for a lot of different reasons, but anyway, that is the end of chapter 5. We are going to get into chapter 6 next week, and I will see you guys then for at least our annotation, because I have some other things to do. All right, bye.